Welcome back, everyone, to R2Kast Series 2, Episode 3. Today we have Perry Parkinson. Now, this is a bit of a strange one. Back on R2Kast Series 1, Episode 11, we had Alexander Perry, which we filmed sort of in the same house. And this is what's happening again today. Perry is all of about 6 metres away from me. But if you want to say hello there, Perry, don't shout through from the living room. Just talk to the phone if you don't mind.
Everybody.
So, Perry's got quite an interesting story, as we'll go through. Not actually from farming, but now is very much in the farming industry, in particular sheep. But we'll let Perry tell you about that. So, could you just give us a bit of background about yourself, Perry? Where you come from and what made you get into farming?
So originally I'm from Haltwhistle, just in the borders there. It's in Northumberland. Grew up not in farming. A lot of my friends at school were from farms, so that's how I sort of got into it eventually. From sort of 15, 16 years old, I would go out to a friend's farm, and whether it was, starting lambing or, driving our pit bikes around fields and looking at cows, it was just sort of started off like that. And I was sort of fortunate enough that the school I attended, Haydenbridge High School, had their own farm and BTEC, course, national diploma that you could get in agriculture as well, which counted as A levels or, your Highers, I think it is in Scotland. So that's how it started. And then it got to sort of 16, 17 years old, and I sort of realised I actually wanted to do more with my life than just, shovel shit as it was on a farm. So decided I better sort of buckle down, get my grades and go off to university, which I finally did up in Ayr there, the same as you with SAC. And it's just sort of spiralled out of control from there, really. So, that's how it started anyway, just through friends, really. So,
was it just livestock you're always interested in? Ever have any much interest in the cropping side, maybe even at uni or when you were younger?
I think no. When I was, I was very sort of naive in thinking that, all of farming was literally just beef and sheep, and that was it. So when I was younger, we lived next to a dairy farm, and I mean, I'm talking when I was 8 or 9 years old. I think I would walk along with the farmer when he was bringing his cows down to get milked in the afternoon, and to me that was me being a big time farmer. So. But no, apart from that, it was just livestock. And then I think obviously, when you go to uni, you get shown every possible avenue, and you get little tasters of everything. So I think, one of my lecturers, I'm not sure if you'll have had him, I don't know if he'd left or not, but Gordon Sohn, he, talking about soils, that was a big eye opener for me, and like every farmer should know, without soil, you don't have a farm. So, it's the same with grassland as well. Jan Connell, she used to talk about grass quite a lot, whether you were measuring it or growing it, and arable crops as well. It's all relevant, So no, it was a big eye opener, and it set me up for. We'll talk about it later on anyway. But obviously, when I went to New Zealand, it helped me big time, So it's and it still has helped me to this day. So it's beneficial anyway. That's for sure.
I think that sort of going to uni and only seeing it as agriculture, certainly this area of the country, sort of south and west, is probably a bit different up the east coast in that livestock seems to be what we think is agriculture. But soil, for those of you listening that maybe want to get into it, soil and crops is the basis for which the industry is built on. I just wanted to take a quick caveat away from Perry and ask him to move his hand out of the way. If you're wondering where this gorgeous hoodie came from, if you check, oh, perfect. Well, actually, you're going to have to speak and do that, Perry. People can't see you at the minute, so say something and do that.
Right, what do you want me to say?
Anything.
Buy this merch.
Perfect. It's just because the camera only sees who's talking. So people on Spotify at the minute are going to be thinking, what is happening? Perry's wearing UNIT merch, which is EWE, as in like yow, sheep, KNIT, as in like with yarn, that sort of thing, or wool, whatever you want to say, which is the merch of Carol Devani, who was on the podcast back in November. So go check out the podcast with Carol on UNIT if you want to see where he got that from. But away from plugging X podcasts, on the one at the minute, You were at uni there, Perry. You went up to Ayr from England, which is a good decision, choosing to go to the better country. What happened after uni? Was it straight away out of the UK, or was there other things in between?
No, it was literally, I think we graduated on the Friday, and then come the Monday, me and my best friend Joseph, we got on a plane and flew out to New Zealand. So to us, it was 13th of July, so it was midsummer. It was all going to be perfect, and flew out there and quickly realised it was the start of winter, and it was horrific. It wasn't all these green rolling hills we expected when we first went out. So we were straight into the calving season, and it was a sort of a quick reality check, really. So
in other news today, everyone, the world is round. When you went out, you're straight into calving. Can only assume New Zealand, that was in a dairy unit. Could you tell us a bit about the farm? What was involved, numbers, maybe breeds?
Yeah. We went out there and we were milking. Well, me and my friend, we were on two neighbouring farms, which were both in a contract milking sort of agreement with each other. My farm was the bigger one, milking just over 2,000 cows, and that was through an 80-point rotary parlour there. So, obviously, same as New Zealand-based system, it was all based off grass, and centre pivots for irrigation and things like that. So it was very, very sort of low input scale, but high output. When we first went out there, that was when they had the first real sort of price crash. Obviously out in New Zealand, they get paid on their milk solids rather than litres. So, I think they were down at $4 a kilo, I think. So at the time it was pretty bad, but I think it's a lot better now anyway. So, but no, a big shock from, two boys who'd come out from the UK seeing, very intensive dairy systems as it was, so, big shock anyway.
On a 2,000 cows, I mean, it's not unheard of in the UK, not at all, but it's pretty rare. How long does it take to milk it on an 80-point system for that, roughly?
I think roughly about 5 or 6 hours, I think. By the time you'd finish cleaning up at the end as well. I mean, cleaning up, you're pretty much standing in the same position with the hose letting the rotary parlour do itself. So it's not that bad, but it's quite long. And when you're doing that twice a day as well, it fair amounts to some high working hours,
So what's that, about 400 an hour, roughly?
But it's said, so it's quite rapid. You can change the speed of the rotary parlour, but it's pretty, out there you haven't a clue and you're just constantly chasing your tail. But, towards the end of the season there, you can quite happily milk them as fast as you can, So it's it's an amazing thing to do, and I would always push people to try and to go and get the opportunities. So
with the fact it's paid on solids, I've been trying to do the math in my head at the minute, but not getting anywhere. You said about £4 a kilo. Now solids is about 13%, give or take. So I'm really trying to work out how much that is a litre. So what's that about?
Well, I think that. I said it's what, 4.5. I think it was $4.50 a kilo. So
is that a kilo of milk? Sorry,
that's a kilo of milk solids.
That is of solids. So,
I mean, it's a long time ago now, but if you think not New Zealand cows, they're not like our big Holstein Friesians here that are pumping out 35 litres a milking. They were probably, I mean, I might get this completely wrong. You're probably looking at 10 or 20 litres as a total, So, when you take the equation out of that of milk solids, I mean, I'm not really that sure. You could get 2 or 3 kilos maybe as a cow per milking, or per day, should I say. I mean, we might have to Google this after and think of it. But yeah, no, at the time it was the worst they'd had, I think, for a long time. So, but I mean, to us, $4.50 sounds absolutely crazy, but it's just, that's the way it is over there. Yeah. So,
and on that, I've assume you said it sort of wasn't Holstein Friesians, quite clear given the sort of fact they're paying on solids. Was it mainly jerseys, or? It's
a cross, the sort of typical New Zealand cross out there. Well, a lot of folk have jerseys, but a lot of this, I'd say the main bulk are Holstein or Friesian cross Jersey. Right. You know, and they seem to keep that way through, or they'll put a Jersey over those cows, you know, just to keep those milk solids there. So rather than quantity, because at the end of the day, they don't need a lot of milk. They just need the milk solids. So, it was interesting to see, though.
We've all heard of New Zealand system. Well, maybe we haven't, but the New Zealand system certainly, I wouldn't say buzzword, but it's always sort of been there, and something that's getting integrated quite commonly now into UK dairy industry. Could you tell us a bit about what it's based on, how it works? You're talking about central pivot irrigation there, all that sort of stuff. Could you just tell us about how that all goes?
Well, I think the main thing to talk about is the fact that they don't have any subsidies anymore, like us here in the UK. So I think when people talk about the New Zealand system and why it's so great, a lot of people would say anyway, it's the fact that it's, you know, they've had all this time since losing out on subsidies to really, you know, become these ultimate efficient farmers that are great at saving money, you know. So it's a very ruthless way of farming, I would say. You know, if nothing's performing, you know, if they've got bad feet, you know, here in the UK, you would treat them and you would give them a second chance. A lot of people would, but out there it's very cutthroat, and you know, if they don't perform, they're gone and that's it. So, in the scheme of things, it's very low input and high output with the prices they're getting, but very much based off grassland management. Apart from a roof that a milk and parlours built underneath, there's no other buildings on the farm really, unless it's to house palm kernel that you'll feed inside the parlour outside in troughs, you know. So all year round, you know, grazing all year round outside all year, and then calving for a couple of months of the year, and that's pretty much it, you know.
And how long would they be on a specific pasture for?
I mean, it depends. You know, it varies on the size of the paddocks. Obviously, out there the paddocks are quite big, but I was running mobs of sort of 700, you know, so they can fair shift through a bite of grass quite quickly, you know. So I mean, you know, you could have a size paddock there, and they'd be in it for 2 or 3 days, you know, 2 or 3 breaks anyway, and then shift off to the next one. Very much like here in the UK as well, you know, you'd probably be looking at 21 or 24 day rotations. So, yeah.
And you mentioned subsidy there. It's a big thing at the minute in the UK. You know, Brexit's happening, and what does that mean? Now, I think we've been guaranteed it till 2028 from memory. Was it 2002 they ended in New Zealand? That seems to ring a bell.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I heard it was going to be 20 years next year or something like that. There's always that assumption that it's going to be hell for a while, and I think that's fair to assume, that things are going to be really difficult for farmers, because it's something that we've expected, depended on to a point, especially in a lot of sort of Scottish hill places, you know. But there's also that argument that once the bad's gone, efficiencies are going to increase. Do you think that's true?
I think it's going to push. It's going to force a lot of farmers to become more efficient. That's for sure. You know, I know obviously we'll speak about it later as well, but obviously me coming onto the Barony here, you know, that's one thing that I'm sort of striving towards, is efficiency. And you know, if I can sort of teach or show young students now that this is the only way, I think a lot of farmers are going to survive, and hopefully they'll be able to go home and either push it on their parents or have it in the locker for rent, you know, for when they farm themselves. So I think some farmers will be fine, you know, big farms, you know, with high output, they'll be fine. You know, all these cooperatives, they'll be fine. But like you said there, you know, the smaller hill farmers that are pushing 65, 70 now, you know, a lot of them will be relying, you know, solely on their ground for the payments at the minute. So it's it's going to be carnage, I think. But I think the more people are prepared and understand it, I think the better the UK's actually got of coming out like New Zealand, you know. Yeah.
So you went out to New Zealand straight after uni. That happened straight away. Really didn't waste any time on that. Maybe went to see mum and dad quickly and then left. How long were you out there for?
It was just under a year we were out there, so a whole season pretty much. And then we went traveling. We finished work in the December the following year. No, just before that. And then went out traveling in the summer. So in New Zealand, we did a whole tour around both of the islands there with the Kiwi bus, they call it. And that, it sounds crazy, but you can travel the whole 2 islands in 3 weeks and have seen everything. So it's, but best time of my life. And then we went out to Australia, met with another couple of friends, went round there up the East Coast, and then flew home just in time for lambing time, I think. So it was no rest for the wicked, really. Just brings you to reality. So
it's interesting. Perry says it was the best time of his life. I have lived with him for 6 weeks, and I've heard nothing about anything apart from New Zealand. So he's not lying with that one. Was it North or South Island you were based in on the farm?
South, we were Ashburton, which is mid Canterbury. Very much a sort of flat, it's almost like the East Coast arable side sort of thing. It's just flat grassland, really, arable. So. And
did you work in Australia? Just travel?
No, just travelled. I think for what would it be 6 or 8 weeks, I think we were. So, yeah.
Is it northeast coast heading up to like Alice Springs and that? Is that, have I got Australia right there?
We started off down in Sydney and then worked our way up the east coast right up to Cairns. Did the Great Barrier, sort of tour around the Great Barrier Reef and things like that, and then flew home. Very, very depressed, I'd say. So,
and I think I have to ask you, nothing to do with food or farming here, but it's always the question that I assume people that have been to both ask: Australia or New Zealand?
I don't know. I mean, scene-wise, New Zealand was beautiful. You can never compare anything to New Zealand. I think Australia was a bit I don't really sound professional here, but I think Australia was a bit more wild, to be fair. But I think we were very lucky in the sense that the people we'd met and travelled around with New Zealand with, a lot of them had come over to Australia as well. So we managed to keep that same friendship group intact. And I think a lot of it depends on who you're with and who you meet as well. But by far the best thing that me and Joseph will have ever done in our entire lives, So I tell people every day, if I can, just go out there and do it,
And he does. Just one thing, you said Australia was wild, and it actually sort of jogged my mind there. You said there were sort of Holstein Friesian cross jerseys for the most part. Was there any issues with sort of docility-wise? Were the Jersey side bring in any wildness, or was it not too bad?
The bulls were. I mean, when it comes to mating time, obviously there'll be a certain percentage of the herd get, AI'd with dairy semen, and then the rest will be beef bulls. But at the end of the sort of AI and breeding season, the bulls will go out and typically in the morning you'd go out and get the cows by yourself, but at that point you need 2 people there, one person to get the cows and the other person to stand in the gateway with stones ready to stop the bulls from coming out and join the cows in the parlour. So it's 3 o'clock in the morning, it's pitch black and frosty. It's quite a job. So, but no, I'd say jerseys typically, well, any dairy breed really, aren't they? The bulls are very temperamental. You try not to deal with them as little as you can, really. But you just got to be careful with everything.
What happened with male calves?
So I think typically a lot of people think that majority of male calves get shot. Don't get me wrong, some dairy bull calves do get shot. That's just the way it is out there. There's no sort of real market for them. But a lot of the calves that are born on beef crosses anyway, they're called bobby calves. So whilst I was out in New Zealand, because I'd had experience feeding calves before rearing calves, that was my head job as well as milking and grazing cows and things as well. So that would be my job as well, as looking after these bobby calves. And you would feed them your colostrum for 2 days, and then milk for 2 days, and then at 4 days old, a big lorry turns up. You load them all up, tag them, load them all up, and then they go away to the factory works, as it was. So and that's calf production out in New Zealand. I think I don't want to say too much about it. But,
no, it's just out of interest, because I mean, you guys that listen to me quite often, probably not listening to me, probably listening to folk that I have on, know I film this quite a bit in advance, and we're filming this in December, and I think it got made illegal here in the UK about 6 weeks ago. I think it was the end of October, and it just just wondered what the sort of crap was. So your depressing jet-lagged flight home brought you back to the UK, pretty much straight back into lambing. Where was it you were lambing?
I was lambing up in Lockerbie. I'd started lambing there when I was at uni. I think I'd actually gone through the NSA lambing list and got it just for a bit of experience. Just seeing sort of different sites and different farm, because, every year leading up to that, I'd been at, a couple of friends' farms, family farms, and, it's never the same as, getting a real job and working for someone else that you don't sort of know. So no, it was very much straight back. And I think I'd been at home for 2 weeks and then was straight into lambing there for a month and a half. So, like I said, another reality shock when you've been sunbathing and drinking for the last 3 months, I think. So
he says as if he didn't keep that up. Maybe not the sunbathing in Lockerbie in March and April, but maybe the drinking side. You mentioned the NSA, and I just want to quickly jump over to that. This will be coming out maybe the start of February, which Perry will have started lambing during, but we'll get into that. If you've heard Perry say the NSA list, what that is the National Sheep Association. Now, plugging my podcast again, jump back to R2Kast number 20. You'll see it was with Kevin Harrison. It's all got the Clarkson's Farm stuff on it because he was on there. The NSA lambing list is basically just, I think it started getting populated a week ago. Loads of jobs, some paid, some not. They're pretty open about that. Lambing jobs the country over, all the way from this time of year, sort of in a couple of weeks' time, some of your pure flocks and all that sort of thing, all the way through to May time. It's brilliant. I've benefited from it twice. Perry, you're saying you found, was it just one you'd found, or had you done it a couple of times?
No, I just did it the once, and I was there for 4 years in a row after that. So,
no, it's brilliant. For you guys that are wanting to get, I'm not even going to say the sheep industry, wanting to get into livestock side, it's a good thing to learn in general. I would strongly advise checking it out. Once lambing finished for you that year then, Perry, did you wait on that farm, or were you headed elsewhere?
I did a little bit after lambing time. I sort of stuck around, commuting, for the next couple of months up to theirs and doing, the odd bit of silage, or whether it was cart and muck or things like that, shearing. And then I think it was the July, I saw a job as it was a dairy herdsman down in Somerset, and I thought, this actually looks quite interesting. So I just applied, and I think it was about half an hour after I'd applied, I think I got a phone call from John Wilson at the time. He was the head manager, and he called me and said, are you available for an interview? So I jumped in the car and went down, and the next day I was there for an interview, and then quickly realised when I pulled up to the main reception HQ, it was Yo Valley, the organic milk and yogurt company. So I think, I certainly stopped for a second. I was like, what on earth am I doing here? But yeah, so long story short, I applied for that job and went for an interview, and thankfully got offered it a couple of weeks later. And then that was me for a year and a half, sort of thrown straight into this organic dairy system that I wasn't necessarily used to. But like I said, quickly sort of fell in love with the job still, and implemented a lot of my, New Zealand grassland based system onto that. Obviously being organic, we couldn't spread fertilizers, so we were separating our slurry, and then as soon as cows had finished grazing outside, the whole paddock could be topped, and then we would spread slurry on that, and then 21 days later we were back in with covers of over 3,000 kilograms of biomass. So it was I think New Zealand definitely made the job a lot more, and I think it would have made me a bit more attractive when I went for the job as well. So
at Yo Valley, first off, how many cattle were they milking there?
I was milking 180 at the time. They've got 2 farms, so we were the sort of back end farm up in the hill. not necessarily the show farms. So, but yeah, 180 Friesians, purebred Friesians.
And does that produce all of the milk for all Eo Valley yogurt, or is it bigger than that?
It's slightly more bigger. It's they're part of a organic milk buyers group called Omsko, who technically buy their milk, which then sort of in a roundabout way, I think, comes back into the company that way. So I think it would have been made up of a couple of farms, you know, obviously our 2 farms plus a few more, but I think obviously for the most part, our milk anyway.
Was there quite a few folk on that farm? Just because I assume it would come with more than just when it's got a big company behind it like that.
You'd actually be surprised. Only me and my at the time were the only 2 people on the farm, as well as our young stock rearer Mark, who was on an independent sort of farm next door, who would come in and feed. But apart from that, it was just us 2, and it was the same down at the sort of show farm as it was. There was only another 2 people there, and that was it. So in the factories where they made all the yogurt and everything else, there was thousands of people, you know, but on the farms there was 5 collectively. So
yeah, it's an advancing industry that is requiring less and less labour. From an organicity perspective, I mean, we all hear about organic. We see it on some of the milk we buy, whatever, and we want to get organic. But I think for the most part, there's a bit of a misconception as to what it means. Now, as I said, we're filming this in December. Fertiliser, to my knowledge, is about the 7-10 mark, I think, and I would assume only really looking to go up from what some folks say. Some folks think it'll go down. It'll be interesting to see where we are when this comes out. But it could be of a benefit to go organic and start avoiding sort of inorganic fertilisers from a monetary perspective. But what I would like to ask is what does organic production actually involve? Is there a major difference in general, or is it just small changes here and there?
I think, well, from what to my knowledge, so I don't think there's that much of a change to conventional farming. I think medicines wise, which is obviously probably one of the main challenges people will face, you know, we would try homeopathic remedies and things like that as well, just to try and keep things at bay. But for the most part, you know, if a cow's sick and it needs to be treated, it's treated. But as of conventional farming, say a jag has a 7-day withdrawal period on it for milk. In organic systems, you've got to times that by 3. So you would have 21-day milk withdrawal rather than 7, just for the fact that it's organic. So, I mean, yeah, some of it might not actually make sense to people, because if it's not present in the milk after 7 days, why have we got to wait another 14, you know? But no, I think there's a time and a place for it, I think, and it does suit some systems. It suited us quite well. Obviously, being in the public eye as well, it, you know, like everything else, it makes your company more attractive, doesn't it? So, but certainly for the grass management side of things, I mean, having no fertilizer did not slow us down in the slightest. You know, we were still producing some pretty decent grass swords at, you know, 21-day, 24-day rotations just by using separated slurries. So it just shows you that it's not that much of a hindrance. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, it is interesting, and I think it's one of those things I always think folk have a bit of a misconception about, and I'll include myself in that. I mean, I understand it to a point, but yeah, I think it's some folk are so pro organicity and don't fully know what it involves, and I think some folk are right anti it as well and still not fully knowing what it involves. But moving on from Eo Valley, where did you said you were there for about a year and a half? What followed that?
Sort of a lot of working hours, I think, anyway. But I think that was the point. I think was obviously just, you know, you're working from, you know, I was up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then some nights I wouldn't be home until 9 o'clock at night. So when you're doing that 12 days in a row, it does sort of get to you. So, but no, a friend of mine from school, she actually messaged me and said, "Oh, are you still looking to go back into beef and sheep? There's a job here I've just seen advertised in Stranraer." I think up until that point, I'd been to Stranraer once for a 21st party, and I didn't see much of it really. So I had a look at this job, and it was a beef and sheep job up there in Stranraer, working with pure Herefords and Romney sheep. I obviously the Herefords and the Romney sheep both attracted me because of New Zealand anyway. So I thought I'd give the guy a ring and go up and have a look. So went up and got offered the job there and then, really. So I was quite fortunate in that aspect. So, but yeah, I was there for, I think, just over 4 years until I left, 6 months ago it is now, I think, coming up for 7. So, and that was predominantly a stockman job, and it was running 700 Romney sheep, very, very low input system. And then there was 200 pedigree line 1 bred Hereford cows as well. So we had on-farm sales with the breeding cows, heifers, and then bulls every February as well through Dumfries Market. And then the same with we had 100 pure Texels as well. So we had top sales there every September as well. So it was nice. It was a nice change to the traditional beef and sheep farm. Everything just goes to market and that's it. So it was nice.
How did you like the Romneys?
I loved them. I think that's obviously where half of this sort of efficiency things come out, whilst I've been here at the Barony. So just a very low input sheep. You could run them on almost concrete and still make money off them. So it was there was 700 of them. I'd go out with my dog at lambing time, and just me and my dog, and that was it. It would be done in a month, and you would rarely have to touch anything. And yeah, just made phenomenal, mothers and good lambs, good carcasses, and I can't really fault them, really. So,
and am I right in saying they're one of the only breeds at the minute that, I'm not going to say you can make money, but you maybe don't lose as much money as we do on the wool side of things?
No, big time. I mean, I think if a decent sized Romney, it's a 4 or 5 kilo fleece you can get off of it, So, and obviously with Romneys and Merinos as well, there is the possibility to shear them twice, which a lot of people do. We only shore them the once, but you'd still be making well over £1.50 per kilo. So it soon adds up when you're making that many kilos of wool. So it's it's definitely a much easier breed to sort of at least try and make a profit off than these lowland breeds.
And aiming for that sort of breeding side between the Romney Texel and the Hereford cattle there, what did that involve for yourself? Was there quite a lot of dressing, or how did that go?
No, well, the beauty of those sales that we held, everything was actually in its working clothes. So they would come in, not a single animal would be dressed. They would come in from the fields in the morning, be put into a pen, and sold later on that day. So I think that's obviously what attracted a lot of people, that nothing was pampered, nothing was fed. They were buying what they saw, and it would last them, So I think that's the main problem with a lot of, if we're going down this rabbit hole, I think that's the problem with a lot of a lot of these sheep breeds nowadays in the UK. They're just getting a bit ridiculous, and people are paying big money for something that's been kept in a shed and fed its whole life. So it's it's good if it's kept in that system, but if a real normal sort of hill farmer wants to use it, it's not going to work. So it's it was nice. It was nice to sort of be on the forefront of that sort of reputation, as it were.
I completely agree with you on that. I think that, like, we've all got involved in shows and trying to make our stock look better for a day out, that sort of thing. But I think there's a bit of a problem on these sort of showy sales. I mean, it's becoming, some of the figures you see, and they're always the figures that got onto the news and stuff like that. So then there's this sort of idea that, farmers can just go sell something for 100,000, and that's obviously to somewhat of an extreme. But I ponder the sort of authenticity of it as well. But I don't know how deep we should go down this hole without offending anyone. But it's true, and I'm happy to say it out loud. It just I like the idea of how that was working at the place you were at, and your working clothes, as you said. There's a lot more, how do I put it, honesty to that. Which it's not hiding the fact it's been in the shed its whole life. It's I quite like that. So you're there for the best part of 4 years. It must have been up your street much more than the 14-hour days from before. You've now, I think, was it May you started with SRUC?
Yeah, end of May.
End of May. So you've been here now 6 months, half a year now. We're just into December now. Could you tell us how working for SRUC came about, first off?
How was it? So the guy I was working for in Stranraer was starting to slow down and not entirely sell up, but he was getting rid of all of the Romneys and half of the cows. So unfortunately, there wasn't really much of a job left for me. But the plan was at the time I was going to go self-employed, rent a load of ground from our next door farm that we'd previously rented, and just go self-employed and start contract shepherding with other folk around Stranraer. And just before, already bought my sheep, bought my tops, had started topping, and then George Beakey, the head of SRUC here, he gave me a call one day out of the blue, and sort of introduced himself and just, said he'd heard that I was looking for work, and he thought he'd have the perfect opportunity for me. And then about 2 weeks later, I'd spoken to Hugh McClyman, my current boss, Southwest Farms manager. Just instantly had a good relationship with him. And then after a couple of sort of bumpy months where it was a go and then not, end of May came around, and then I was here. So it's been a pretty, how would I put it? Yeah, pretty interesting 6 months, but amazing 6 months at that. So.
And Perry's got an interest in estimated breeding values, a lot of sort of progressive ideas in the sheep side of things, and we're going to get into that. He was actually going to try and get some kind of an advertising opportunity where he's in of his hat today, but he didn't want to wear a hat inside. But it's not just, I think it'd be fair to say you don't have a rake of conventional breeds here at Barony, Perry. Could you tell us a bit about what sheep you're running on the farm?
Yeah, well... Yeah, so I mean, conventional wise, we are still pretty conventional at the minute. If I get my own way, then it won't be from us. When I came, we were running 500 Scotch North of England mules. They were put to a Texel or a Suffolk and lambed in February and March. We got some amazing lambs off them, which all, majority were away by October there. So yeah, it was a good system. It works. We've got plenty of grass for it, but there's a lot of costs involved with housing and feeding, obviously. A lot of these mules at the minute, we're still at 500 now. A lot of the mules at the minute will be running anywhere from, 85 to 115 kilos. So it's a lot of sheep to have running on your ground anyway. So, so obviously dealing with the Romney myself up in Stranraer, came down and instantly wanted to sort of switch things about into my favour, I suppose. Wanted to get a bit of outside lambing going for the students as well. So started speaking to Innovis, started buying a couple of Primera tops based on, EBVs, just to see if there was a difference, see if they were worth the hype, basically. I've wanted to try it for a few years now, and like everything in farming, you get some folk who sing their praises, and then you get some folk who completely write them off. So I wanted to sort of try it for myself anyway and see what the fuss was about. So yeah, 3 Primera tops were bought, and then swiftly after that, I bought 200 Highlander mixed age ewes down from Devon. Sort of got a couple of days off from work to go down and visit them. And then a week later they were up here, and I've never looked back since, really.
So could you tell us a bit about, you're saying Primera, you're saying Highlander, if it wasn't for the fact I lived with you and asked you a few weeks ago what was involved in these sort of composite breeds, I wouldn't know. So can you tell everyone a bit about what they are, why they're a thing, and what breeds are involved?
I think a lot of Innovis is stemmed from, yet again, a New Zealand based farming system, really. So out in New Zealand, we'll start with the Highlander anyway. The Highlander is a composite breed of, I think it's the Romney, which is obviously why I wanted to bring it onto the farm anyway. But Romney was the main base of the breed, and then the New Zealand Texel, which is a slightly finer boned British Texel, easier lambing, and then you've got the Finn sheep, which is obviously a dairy sheep, which puts in the milkiness and high number of lambs as well. So And this is all off, no concentrate feeding. It's 100% purely off grass. So that in itself is the main driving factor for me bringing them on the farm. Is starting to become a bit more efficient and save a bit of money, as well as hopefully teaching students. So and with regards to the Primera tops, I think that's genuinely just a mixture of a lot of our terminal sires here in the UK, whether it's Charolais, Suffolk, Texel, but they've obviously tailor-made this breed now to perform well with no feeding, easy lambing, quick thriving lambs that are up on their feet and sucking within 30 seconds to a minute, which I think a lot of our terminal sires sort of lack one or two of those factors. So I think on paper these Primeras are the perfect top, really. But I mean, I don't want to say too much now until I get my lambs out on the ground. But no, and obviously, like I said, a lot of it's driven by the EBVs as well. If it wasn't for EBVs, I don't think I would have been trying it. So EBVs are a big driving factor for the reason of why I'm sort of implementing them into the system anyway.
And just quickly, I want to jump onto EBVs. What sort of, you mentioned that they're quite prolific. What sort of lambing percentages are you expecting out of the Highlanders?
Well, obviously these were mixed age yows that I bought. So Mike Tucson, who I bought them off last year, he lambed them 236%, I think. So it's pretty high. It's too high, really. I mean, no one wants that many triplets. But like I said, I've tried my best to keep them on good ground, and not flush them before topping. So I'm hoping I'm, the sort of 205, 210 mark at best. It's, if I'm higher than that, it's not that much of a nightmare, because you're going to have plenty of students to feed pet lambs. So, and we've got the facilities to deal with it as well. So, and we've got the grass as well. So, it's, the milkiness is there, but, from back in the dealing with the Romneys there, if any Romney had a triplet outside, I would leave it on. And unless it was, unless it wasn't thriving and it was failing completely, I would take it off. But for the most part, a good 80-90% of those would have reared the triplets. So like I said, unless it's tiny, or unless sure there'll be a few quads as well. But like I said, unless they're really failing, I'll keep them on. And, with the milkiness there from the fin sheet that's built into the Highlander, I can't imagine they're going to struggle with it, really. So
that was actually going to be my next question. With the sort of fin sheep in there and the quality of grass you've got here that you'd always tell me about, if you'd be happy setting out 3, but obviously sounds like it's not a worry at all. From an EBV perspective, we've talked about EBVs on the podcast before. I say we as if I know a lot about them. We've a few folk talking about them. A good one to check back on from a beef's perspective, we're obviously just about to get into it in the sheep side of things, is James Herrick, who I spoke to around the end of November. So go back and check that one if you want to see it on the beef side as well. But could you just tell us a bit about EBVs, Perry, why you're interested in them, what they mean to you, and what they do for a farm?
Yeah, I think, well, obviously, like, it started again at university there. You get taught about all these EBVs and different genetics, and I think it all, if you're not from that sort of that way of breeding, like a lot of normal farmers are, and especially 10 years ago, it wasn't a major thing in sheep at the time, I don't think. It just sort of starts getting you thinking, and obviously going out to New Zealand there and seeing, briefly some sheep systems out there as well, and coming back to the UK, it's soon becoming, fast apparent that EBVs are the only way that you're going to get consistent productivity, from your farm. So, I think I've just, like I said, for the last couple of years, I've seen Innovis knocking about and I've wanted to try it, but obviously never had the opportunity. So, sort of, I've been blessed in a sense that coming down here, I've been given all of the tools and opportunities to try anything I want on the farm, as long as it benefits the students and the farm and the ground, really. So, I have got to thank SRUC for that anyway. So, EBVs, like I said, estimated breeding values, I think every farm should use them, should abide by them, really. And it's just a way of sort of calculating how valuable that animal's going to be to your farm, you know, through its lamb or calf production, really. So these Primera tups that I bought, you know, I'm sort of, it was interesting because I was going in and I was picking these nice, big, strong, you know, long, strong, deep-bodied tups, and when you'd scan over them with the ear tag reader there and look at their EBVs, and they weren't actually anything that special, and it was actually the smaller ones that would have the higher figures somehow. So after sort of bending the reps' ears quite a bit about which ones I actually wanted and which ones I didn't, we sort of finally picked 3. And, you know, on the sort of as an EBV, you know, 0 would be the national breed average, as it were, I suppose. And anything plus above that is good, really. So a lot of these Primeras had, you know, lamb growth of, you know, +4. Lamb and ease was a big thing as well. That's what I was focusing on next as well. Obviously, I wasn't here last year for the lambing, so I'm not sure how that went. But, you know, typically, as a lot of you can imagine, you know, a big 115 kilo mule carrying twins to a Texel or a Suffolk that's been fed off, you know, a kilo of concentrate a day and a load of dairy grass, they're not going to be small lambs. So it's, I think it's more just getting more live lambs out on the ground and you know, getting them away, you know, even if it's a couple of months later, getting them away rather than not having a lamb to sell at all. So, and, you know, if that yow is going to lamb a lot easier, is she going to get in lamb in the first service, you know, come the next breeding season rather than 2 or 3 attempts or not at all, you know? So there's more to EBVs than just, you know, high lamb growth, I think.
It's interesting to hear different folk say what they're looking for, and in my head, as someone who doesn't farm, as you all know, I just want to try and explain what Perry's looking for. Now, the 2 things he mentioned were lamb and ease and sort of quick growth. Now, the reason you'd be looking for that is basically if you can have an easy lambing with a relatively small lamb at birth, then or smaller, that makes things easier, as well as sort of the EBVs that have been passed down, then you're reducing dystocia, which is sort of like disabilities and parturition that can lead to problems for the yow, problems for the lamb, and then also you're sort of getting to that carcass quickly without causing damage at the start, and then that sort of high rate of growth, instead of having a massive lamb at birth that causes problems everywhere, and still gets the same target weight. So that's sort of why those things have been looked for. So you've looked at EBVs for the sheep. Another thing that I quite like listening to. Oh God, I've got to pretend I like listening to him talk about this all the time. What's for dinner tonight? Oh, let's talk about herbal lays. Right, sound Penny, that's fine. No, you've always had a keen interest in grass, which, as you said, sort of stemmed from New Zealand. Stemmed, get it? I should say tillard. Could you just tell us a bit about the importance of grass in your system now? How you utilise that as well?
Yeah, well, I said I turned up here and we had 500 sheep. Lambs were away at 3-4 months of age, and there was a lot of grass. So it was a case of, you know, why do we want to cut silage? Why do we want to cut all these lovely fields of grass for silage and bale it up and have it sitting there wilting away when we can actually utilise it, really? So, like I said, obviously stemming from, bloody stemming's in my head now, stemming from New Zealand and Somerset there with the, you know, with managing grass for the cows, it was very much just implemented on the sheep instead. I'm sort of fortunate in the way that a lot of our paddocks at the minute are set up in a, you know, nicely sized anyway for graze, you know, mob stocking with sheep. So rotational mob stock grazing is quite easy for me at the minute. You know, leave them in there for a week and then move them on to another pasture for a week and just keep it moving like that. And I think we've certainly seen the benefits of it so far anyway. So, you know, coming into the back end in the winter here, you know, like I said, I don't know what it was like last year, but, you know, at the minute, grass covers, they're pretty decent. And, you know, like the results I showed you earlier on from that sward out the back there, they were, you know, phenomenal readings, really. So I think it just shows you that, you know, correct sort of management, it pays off when you need it most, I think. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've got stem from stuck in my head as well. One last thing that you're doing sheep wise
Yeah.
is pretty much lambing from February through to almost the end of April. Now, I know because I'm talking at the minute.
Oh,
and sorry,
end of May. I've got the Dorsets as well.
sorry, yeah, did I say April? I meant end of May. When I'm saying this, Perry's he's crying off screen. Do you want to tell us a bit about how that'll go, why that's happened, and it's yeah.
What's that? The Dorsets or everything?
Just in general, the sort of what's going to be a essentially 4-month lambing period for you.
Yeah, general stupidity, I think, more than anything else. No, I think, yeah, so obviously typically on this farm, it's always been, yows have been sort of typically 100, 120 yows have been sponged for 1st of February lambing, solely on the purpose of early lamb production, with the remainder, say 400 remaining, lambed in close suit in the 1st of March. And then that would have been it finished. Obviously, we're still sticking with that at the minute, but with the addition of these Highlanders that are going to be lambing outside, sort of half basing it on the students, waiting for them to come back after the Easter holidays. That's going to be mid-April. They're going to start lambing. So, but from what I've seen so far with return rate, they're pretty much going to be done by the end of April, I think. So, and then yeah, one we haven't talked about yet is the Dorsets. So, I came here and inherited 50 pure Dorsets that they'd just got. They just sponged and topped, and it was left to me to pick up all of the pieces. So, lambed them there in mid-September. And I said, I'll put my hands up and say I absolutely hated the Dorset when I first arrived, and I think most people would. They just look like a big, fluffy, soft breed that no one's had got any time for. So, but no, come lambing time, as you know as well, Wallace, it was just phenomenal, really. So it was, considering they were all hogs as well, they were all kept pure anyway. I brought them inside a week before they lambed, started feeding them half a kilo cake a day just to make sure there was a bit of milk on them. And yeah, I think I lambed one, and even at that, it wasn't that tight of a pull. There's plenty of milk there, and apart from one that went in the adopter for 4 or 5 hours, I think everything else was perfectly mothered up and turned out within a couple of days' time. And I mean, the lambs are growing like mushrooms at the minute. So, I can't fault them in the slightest, really. So,
no, I mean, I was someone who I wouldn't say I had anything against Dorsets. It's just not one I have considered. And I remember you and I speaking about that. And I often say when I drive past the field with the Dorsets in it that the lambs are looking brilliant, really good lambs. I'd be happy. So no, that's went very well. What was I going to say? One other thing. I actually quite like to talk about that. Obviously, if you haven't picked up already, I haven't said this, but I assume it's quite clear. Perry and I work on the exact same place. Perry is the shepherd on the campus that I lecture at. So, that's hence why we're in the same place, all that sort of thing. How it's obviously a massive change moving from a farm that is purely a farm to a farm that is a farm that also has sort of to make reservations for education, for research. How have you found that? Has it been quite tricky, or?
I think if I hadn't been at Yeo Valley in the past, I think it would have been a lot more of a shock. But like I said, back in Somerset there, you're very much in the public eye. You've got to be aware 100% of the time that there could be, members of the public walking around the farm looking at every move you make. So I think it's just like being here as well. I think, you've just got to mind that, at the end of the day, there is students, there is lecturers, there is, members of the public walking past, and, it's not that implements anything. But yeah, it just makes you think a little bit more, and just makes you, it's can't get away, especially health and safety. I think you can't get away with certain things, So, but no, I think for the most part, I mean, I love my job here, so I wouldn't. I think it's been the perfect move and perfect fit for me, really. So, and students wise, that was me 10 years ago, really. So I can sort of empathise with them a bit when they turn up. So it's nice to sort of try and at least give students, what I sort of wanted or acquired when I was their age, you know. So it's no, it's definitely a big change from a normal traditional farm on the coast of Stranraer. But I think no, I wouldn't change it for the world, really. I might not be saying that at farming time.
Come June time, where you've just been lambing for a third of the year and it's coming up for shearing time. No, very good. It's, you know, it's been good. As I said, obviously, lived together for a few weeks now, thanks to Perry, picking up pieces of my broken relationship and not replacing that, but giving me a house. And just speaking about stuff in general, you get to know someone pretty well, but it's quite interesting to just sort of look at that timeline and see the story of Perry, if you will. But there's well, first off, before the last two questions, is the only thing I haven't given you a heads up about. Is there anything else we haven't covered that you'd quite like to talk about? Or
I don't think so. I think we've pretty much covered everything, I think, anyway. Not that my life's that.
Well, yeah, for those of you that listen often, Perry not being one of them because he doesn't know what these questions are, likes to pretend he listens, but he doesn't. There's two questions I end all with. I have done since 18 months ago, when this comes out, was when the podcast began, not as a podcast, but as People in Farming. Some of you might remember way back in the day, starting with the wonderful Flavian Obiero. I would write big interviews out on Facebook, and people somehow read them all because they're very interesting people. And then obviously the podcast followed 6 months later. But I think it's like the 18-month birthday at the minute. The two questions are, one, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Just want to remember you're going to be 32. And also, so where do you see yourself in 5 years? And if you had any tips for folk coming into industry, what would they be?
5 years' time, I think I said this in the Scottish Farmer, actually. I think I wanted to be Farmers Weekly Sheep Farm of the Year, if possible. I'm hoping to try and work towards that anyway with what I'm doing at the minute. But no, I think in 5 years' time, I'd quite happily be in the same position and situation I am. I said I love the job I'm in. I love getting to my stamp on the farm, letting students and lecturers see it. And yeah, like I said, at the minute, I'm fully content in my job, which I think it's the first time I've been fully content, my whole life with a job, I think. So it's, I think it's definitely come at the right time anyway, I think. So no, I think just trying to put more of a stamp on the farm really in the next 5 years, and yeah, sort of watch the space. And I mean, it'll be embarrassing if we watch this back in 5 years' time and I'm not Sheep Farm of the Year, but we'll just have to try and edit that bit out or something. But and no advice for anyone coming into the industry?
Yeah.
I think just don't be afraid of putting yourself in positions where you think you might fail, because at the end of the day, I'm not from farming, but I was lucky enough to have friends that were. So that was my way in. But I mean, if it wasn't for that, I would have, gone to university and started there. So I think going back to the NSA lambing list for anyone who's, sheep-minded, phenomenal piece of kit that you can use. And, everyone who's on this, everyone who's on the NSA lambing list looking for people are fully aware that, they're after people with little to non-experience, and they're willing to sort of accommodate that. So I think that's the main positive aspect of the NSA lambing list, is the fact that they're not, these hard-working farmers that are looking for an experienced lamb with 20 years experience behind them, So I think that's the main thing. But no, I think just surround yourself with people who are like-minded, watching and listening podcasts and YouTube videos as well, and just just try and just get out there. And if you can get out to New Zealand or Australia as well, or even bloody Holland, to go on a dairy or something, just go and do it. You got a whole lifetime to sit and wish you did, went down a different career path. So I mean, if you want to try agriculture, you may as well put your foot in the door and hope for the best, I think. So, and I think, like I said, farming as a whole industry as well, it's screaming out for, it's been like that for the last 10, 15, 20 years. It's screaming out for young folk to get in, and there's just not enough replacing it, I think. So it's just a case of making it as attractive as possible. And, that's what I'm doing here with the students, is trying to give them the best chance and opportunities, ones that I necessarily didn't sort of get when I was younger. You know, just showing them that there is more to life than just being stuck in a parlour or, you know, dozing a sheep and getting an alarm off it, you know, at the end of the day. So it's just making it more attractive and making it more exciting, I think, is the main thing.
The key points I picked up there was take opportunities and listen to the R2Kast. That was what I heard.
I'll try not to plug. Well, I'm trying my hardest, but
yeah, and you know, ask those two questions. It's almost tradition now. It's always interesting to see where folk want to be, whether they want to be elsewhere or not. It definitely sounds like you don't. Now, bear in mind your current situation is living with me, and it's cute you want to be there in 5 years' time. But no, it's good to see you're happy in the job. That's obviously a major plus, and also the where do you see? The tips for people coming into the farm. Everyone says just take opportunities, open doors. If a bad experience happens, that's just another thing learned. So yeah, I would mirror those points completely. Just go for things, try anything, whatever.
And definitely shout out to, you know, people like yourselves and Cami and that, who's in the, you know, who's publicly in the business, you know, shouting out to people like that to get advice, you know, even asking if they know anyone, you know, of a way to get into farming. I think that's the main thing is, you know, like I said, back when I was a kid wanting to get into farming, unless it was for me not knowing, you know, farmers' sons myself. I mean, you know, if there was someone like you or Cami on a podcast or YouTube, you know, like, you know, you could drop them a message and ask them, how did you get into farming? You know, things like that. But I think there's a lot more opportunities now anyway, and there's a lot more easier ways of getting into it, I think, anyway. So I think, yeah, definitely, YouTube and podcasts are definitely, I think, helping anyway.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. I mean, I actually don't watch enough stuff. I mean, I spend my life creating content that I barely watch it apart from TikTok for like 10 minutes here and there. But honestly, YouTube's brilliant. Like Cami, for example, I film a podcast every week with them, so she's probably try and pretend I watch all these videos. They're excellent. But no, they really are. I mean, things like Cami, Tom, Graham, Sandy Brock. You could mention a million folk, and I've only mentioned big folk there, like big numbers wise. All the folk that are smaller as well, that are pushing what they're doing, showing folk what's out there. I couldn't advise watching it more. And as Penny said, get in touch with some of them. Now, to be put in the same light as Cami's quite exciting. I'll take that on board. But absolutely do. I mean, I've on numerous occasions, I might not have a massive following, but I've got quite a core farming following. And if you are looking for, and I have done this on numerous occasions, as I say, are looking for a lambing job, whatever, message me. I'll try and help. I'll try and use the network I've built up online through lecturing, through being in the farming community anyway. Happy to help, and I'll also share it. And if someone sees it, then brilliant. So feel free to take advantage of that. That's not why I'm here, but I'm certainly happy to do it. But just want to say thank you to yourself, Perry. It's been a pleasure to have you on. Hope you've enjoyed.
About 5 seconds.
Yeah, it's really good to have you on. Good to sort of see that story put in a sort of linear form there. And again, to everyone watching, thank you very much as always, whether you're listening on Spotify or watching on YouTube. Because we're filming this sort of back in 2021, I can't wait 2021's over. Moving into a new year that's not tarnished by COVID, let's hope. I found out something pretty cool last week. Whoever listens to Spotify, you get the Spotify Unwrapped, and I find out how much I love all the TikTok trend songs and how much I listen to them. But also, if you create a podcast, you find out you're unwrapped from that side, as in like who listens to you, which is really cool. And one thing I found out was there's 21 people out there that listen to the R2Kast more than anything else on Spotify. Now, I'm blushing about that. I'm not going to lie. I'm very proud about that. I'm not even going to try and falsify the fact that I think that's so cool. So if you're one of those 21, or if you're one of the, I think it's about 5,200 that have listened to it at the minute, appreciate that as always. And I'll see you in 2 weeks' time for a podcast with Charlotte Mortimer. And we'll see you then. So thank you very much, Perry. And we'll see you next time. Cheers, everyone. Bye bye.